Hello, everyone, and I hope you are all having a great day whenever you are watching this. Today, we are going to be talking about the late Middle Ages, remembering that we've already learned about the early Middle Ages and the feudal society and the manor system. But today, we will be going into the latter half of the Middle Ages. But before we do that, I do want to hop over to Google Classroom and make you all aware that I did post on the stream. I posted this fun little educational video called Fleas on Rats. I think it's really funny. You'll probably get a laugh out of it. Hopefully, I did. But make sure that you watch that when you get the chance. And also be aware of all the information I posted, which is where you'll find this video here. But as we do this video, make sure that you have the Emergence of Nation States notes pulled up. And there will also be a 3-2-1 exit ticket, which you guys have seen before. But this is just where you post 3 things you learned, 2 things you found interesting, and 1 thing that you are confused about or would like to know more on. So make sure you are getting that completed as we go through this video. But I know it seems like a lot. I really just broke this all down so that you guys could watch it at your own time and it wouldn't be as long videos. So, with that being said, let's hop right on over and start with late Middle Ages. So, we'll be talking about the rise of nation states, and this is where the European monarch consolidated their power and began forming nation states in the late Middle Ages. We see these nation states in major places that we know today, such as England, France, Spain, and Russia. So I'll give you all a minute to fill this out on your fill in the blank notes. The first of these nation states we'll be talking about and going into is England and William the Conqueror, who we might remember seeing in our notes previously, but here he is again. So, William the Conqueror was leader of the Normans and what would become known as the Norman Conquest, which is where he was able to unite most of England. And again, remembering how he won at the Battle of Hastings, which we put in our notes before. And then we see this idea of common law, which is seen in first with Henry II. And this was just a strengthened justice system. And we see it in our own sort of justice and political system today in a similar form. It's the basic rights of citizens. So again, thinking about England, we know of the UK today, and we might see Wales and think of Wales as an English territory today, but we're really talking about the beginning of all this and the conquest of this land. So more on England, we have King John, also known as Robin Hood. He was son of Henry II, who again we think back to common law with. But it's kind of ironic because King John abused his powers and taxes and taxed the people quite high. And so the nobles forced him to sign the Magna Carta, which basically said the king isn't above the law just because he's the king, and it limited his power. His brother is known as Richard the Lionhearted. Next, we'll be talking about the Hundred Years' War. And this lasted for 116 years, if you can imagine that. So that's a long time to be fighting. 1337 to 1453. And this pitted England against France. It was fought primarily over claims by the English kings to the French throne and was punctuated by several brief periods of peace. So there was times where it wasn't just warfare, but they didn't last long. And the slow decline of English fortunes after the appearance of Joan of Arc, a woman who in the early 1400s came around and helped with the French army, helping to expel England from French territory. And Joan of Arc was a unifying factor that we'll talk about for France, But looking at the Hundred Years' War with England, just knowing that England lost and that this was a war fought over the control of that land. And with common law, we start to see the idea of parliament, the evolution of parliament, and the idea of citizens having a say in government. And parliament is England's Congress. So moving right along to France, we'll talk about Hugh Capet, who was king of the French. And if we're remembering back to our Frankish kingdom that we learned in Germanic tribes, he established the capital of Paris and started the Capetian dynasty. So remembering family name is always important. And going back and looking at this Hundred Years' War again, and remembering that England lost and France won, and Joan of Arc, a teenage girl who inspired the French military, really helped to for the French winning, and for obviously she got persecuted pretty severely. She was tried and found guilty of hearsay, and she was burned at the stake. I can't remember exactly how old she was, but she was, I want to say like 15 to 17. So thinking about that in that role and playing that huge of a part in your country's either victory or downfall. And here's some pictures of Joan of Arc being a leader and really heading the French army into victory. So thinking about the role of women then and how far, I mean, that was a big deal then for a woman to even brace the field. So to keep this short, we'll move right along with Spain. And here we're going to talk about Ferdinand and Isabel. And they unified the country with their marriage. And they also expelled Jews and Moors from Spanish territory. And the Spanish Empire expanded under Charles V. But in 1556, when Charles V was old, exhausted, and disillusioned, he gave up his titles and divided his empire and entered a monastery. And we'll talk about the Spanish successor next, King Philip II, just a little bit. But thinking back to Ferdinand and Isabella, we might have learned about them in elementary school with Christopher Columbus exploration and being the ones to fund that. We'll also talk about the Spanish Inquisition and Reconquista. We see that in our vocab. And there's good old Charles V. And up there, Ferdinand and Isabella. Ferdinand is a handsome old guy. He kind of, I don't know. I think that's a bad painting of him. He wasn't very photogenic there compared to Charles V. So here's some pictures of the Spanish Inquisition. This being where a lot of people, Jews and Moors, were persecuted by this Inquisition, this group of people who wanted to expel them from their territory. And this shows how large the Spanish Empire under Charles V was. So looking over to where we're at in North America, while Virginia wasn't claimed, we see Florida and places like Cuba, Texas, our Mayan and Aztec empires that we see fall to European explorers, especially the Spanish and Hernan Cortez, remembering back to that. And next and finally, we'll talk about Russia. So Ivan the Great threw off the rule of the Mongols. He centralized power in Moscow and expanded the Russian nation. So he's labeled Ivan the Great because the Russians looked at him with such admiration for his ability. Thinking back to Charlemagne, what did we also call Charlemagne? I hope you thought Charles the Great, because when you are successful in both being a leader, both in the military and to the people, you get this title. And there is a statue, I want to say, in Russia of Ivan the Great. but I could be wrong. I know there's one of Peter the Great in St. Petersburg. But next, we'll go to this word Tsar or Czar. You see it spelled either way. And this was the title given to the leader of Russia. And this is looking back to some of our ideals of Rome, with it being linked to Caesar, which was the title of the Roman emperor. And then the Orthodox Church really helped in the unification of Russia. So thinking about the role religion plays in not only the um, the role religion plays in what we'll talk about in the Crusades, but also in the idea of like Battle of Tours with Islam spread, remembering the how valued religion was in this time. And this shows some Russian architecture, some of the influences. And thinking about where Russia is geographically also with this picture. But that is it for all of the rise of nation information from the slides told to you by me, Miss King. Uh, there is some readings and a Google form for you to complete that will help you further expand your knowledge on this topic. So as always, unless you have any questions or concerns, farewell. But if you need anything, please reach out to me at kingb@ameliaschools.com. All right, bye.